Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 41 of Fracking Nightmare. It doesn't seem that it's some 6 weeks since I was last sat here in Plymouth broadcasting episode 40. But in that time, I've been pretty busy. I've covered a lot of ground. 5 weeks in Australia. A series of events in Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, and finally in Brisbane. And the event in Brisbane was in exactly the same venue as the G20 conference. But we were there a few days after the politicians and their hangers-on had departed Australia's shores. But you could still feel the sleaze and the corruption oozing out of the walls all around the building. So I guess that we were there to perhaps rectify some of the negative energy that had been hanging around there over the previous week. Well, during my time in Australia, I took the opportunity to spend some days up at the developing gas fields of New South Wales, where AGL are drilling some exploratory wells into the coal seams to extract what the Australians call coal seam gas, what we in the UK call coal bed methane, but it's one and the same. So this is AGL in Hunters Valley, a beautiful part of the northern New South Wales, but an area that is about to be decimated, not just with the drilling for coal seam gas, but also with open cast mining. I must confess that I was made incredibly welcome by the people, the residents of Gloucester, but a rather frosty welcome perhaps from people who I might have expected to be natural allies, but maybe more of that another time. Then after the Brisbane event, I went into the horrendous abomination of the gas fields of southern Queensland. My host was my good friend Brian Monk and his family, his son David, his wife Carol, and David's wife Kathy. I had 4 days with the Monks, travelling around the gas fields and meeting other people who are now forced to live what is truly a fracking nightmare. I'm going to show you, give you a little bit of a taster. I was going to say teaser, but that would be very much the wrong word here. But a taster of what is to come as we put together the footage that I've brought back from Australia. So let me introduce you to some of the players that I met in southern Queensland. And I have to say, I absolutely take my hat off. I have the utmost admiration for all the people I met there who have decided not to sell out, not to take the dirty money, but to resist the unconventional gas industry. Well, Brian, thanks very much for hosting me for the last few days here. Yeah, thanks for you and David and Carol and Kathy and all the kids giving me the time, showing me around. I mean, it could be argued that in many respects you have an absolutely idyllic life here.
Well, we certainly did have. It's now got the problem of gas, but yeah, we had what we believed to be an idyllic life here. And it's still, the reason we're still here is obviously we're fighting to keep this and we're fighting not to leave. So yeah, it was pretty ideal.
Yeah, well, for early days, we just thought, we heard a bit of hoo-ha about the industry coming, the odd sign appeared, but we just thought, we've got a bad mortgage that eventually they'll come here, hopefully, and we'll get a couple of wells, we weren't against the industry. It was one of those things, you sort of thought, okay, we might do all right out of this industry. And within, I don't know, probably 6 months of them sneaking out of the scrub over the back, we started getting coated with all sorts of crap. And yeah, you just knew that you had to go the other way, but when you start making complaints to the industry and they sort of come around and have a look and say, oh, there's nothing to see here, you start to wonder. And then other people in town just said, well, John, you're complaining for no reason type thing. And then, like I say, it took a little while before we could no longer drink the water. And we knew, that we're in trouble then.
The way they get most people to sign up is by coming at you with a checkbook, and everyone needs money. John and I need money just as much as anybody else. I've been poor most of my married life. I'd rather be poor than take their dirty money. I was brought up in a good Catholic family, very wealthy family. But I'd rather be poor than take QGC's money, CSG money.
What's happening in this country, especially with this stuff here now? Not only this, but, you know, mining and everything, you know, what's going on. You know, we're leaving nothing for children, you know, and this, you know, like I said, mate, you know, before all this happened, you know, like I grew up thinking that, you know, the great Aussie way was looking after each other, mate, you know. And as I got older, mate, it's full of shit, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I grew up knowing that the farmers fed us, mate, you know, and that's whether it was beef or whether it was vegetables or whatever it was. But now, you know, this whole stuff about this, it's just lining people's pockets.
Yesterday, as we all know, this is just a pilot project, and so it's not a production thing, but they're talking 110 wells, up to 30 wells if it goes ahead in a few years' time. I don't want to be here then, because it probably will be something like you had at Bentley.
Yeah, really.
Well, I'm imagining
Yeah.
that the protests will be a lot bigger if it gets to that stage.
You better hope so.
Well, I just don't want to be involved, you know, in this capacity. You know what I mean? Like if that happens,
Yeah.
I don't want to be here for it because I don't enjoy.
Damage being done now by coal seam gas is starting to become quite obvious now. You know, we've got water bores that are basically being blown out of the ground. We've got rivers now that are bubbling, and we've got this massive amount of contamination that you know, contaminated material that has to be disposed of on the ground and into the river systems and so forth. So, you know, we're starting to show now the rest of the world what's
The
going
vegetable
on.
garden for 4 years. The first 4 years we come here, we basically never bought any produce out of town. All the fresh fruit and the fruit trees that died, all the veg come out of the garden. You know, like we used to have a beautiful lawn around the front there with roses on it, and over I think about 3 nights of rain, it was dead, gone. Joe spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours building a garden here. When we come here, it basically looked like out the front there, like the road. And like she said, why would you go outside? Why would you do this anymore? You know, you just curl up in your house, I suppose, and forget about it.
If the population
We'll
at
try.
large starts to learn from our experience, right? So that the government says it's all going to be great and it's regulated. Well, we've been for a drive. You've been around the traps with us now, the gas field, and you can see there is no regulation. I mean, that's just words. That's spin, rubbish. And now that the evidence is becoming so obvious. I mean, a water bore that blows out water 6 feet into the air for 24 hours or more straight has been pressurised by contamination into the aquifer. Now, that same aquifer, I believe, was contaminated and damaged, and that started the gas bubbling into the Condamine River. I think these are all linked, and as they remove the water out of the coal seams, it is now just releasing the gas, and the gas is coming out of the ground here. The Southern Cross University from New South Wales, they drove a piece of sensitive equipment around, and they discovered that the gas is coming out of the ground. It's worse near their facilities, but it's actually coming out of the ground. So we are literally becoming poisoned by the gas through the ground on our own
I actually can't
property.
think of a more important decision that people need to reflect upon, and that is whether or not to permit an industry which has a proven track record of contamination of the water, of the soil, and of the air. It should be a no-brainer. It should be. We should be doing other things, but it seems for the time being at least, This has to be our focus. We will defeat this industry. Of that, I'm in no doubt. The only issue is how much damage, how much contamination we permit before we shut it down. I just hope to God that people aren't watching this in some archive in 100 years' time, thinking there were people who knew. There were people who understood what this industry would do to the planet and the misery that it would create for future generations. And they'll be watching this as they fight water wars or worry about where they're going to get the next litre of water to be able to give to their children. If you think that's alarmist, buy a plane ticket and come out to southern Queensland, or go out to Pennsylvania, or to any of the shale plays in the US, and go talk to those people who haven't taken the money from the gas industry, and you will hear the same story everywhere. It started with just one well. As you can see, being in the Queensland gas fields is really quite an emotional experience, especially when you consider that everything that I witnessed there has manifested in less than 7 years. It is not beyond the realms of possibility, or if the British government gets its way, probability, that much of the UK will be in a very similar condition by 2021. Now, during that short clip, you were introduced to an origine by the name of Neil. Now, Neil was very emotional during the recording because BG Group, which is one of the companies that was spun off from British Gas some almost 30 years ago, BG Group have their headquarters in Reading, and BG Group have just totally ignored all of the sacred sites, and in some cases have literally drilled on top of Origine sacred sites. Now, the chairman of BG Group is this gentleman here, Andrew Gould. Now, Andrew Gould was Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Schlumberger between 2003 and 2011. And almost exactly 20 years ago, I seem to recall that I spent about an hour and a half speaking with Andrew Gould at the back of the plane, or back of the cabin, on a flight from Houston to Paris. And we had an interest in a particular project that was going on in Schlumberger at that time. Now, I haven't spoken to Andrew Gould since then, and I doubt very much whether he would remember that conversation. But Andrew Gould, today you are the chairman, the executive chairman of BG Group, and whether you are aware or not, and I hope for your sake that the case is not, your company, BG Group, is a desecrator of Origine sacred sites. The comparison would be iGas, or Rathlin, or Third Energy, or Quadzilla, putting a rig right in the heart of, say, Stonehenge, or the crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral. Do you think there would be a bit of an outcry in this country? Well, there's no outcry in Australia, because it's not being reported. In fact, it is staggering how little people know around the coast of what is going on in the hinterland. So if anybody watching this knows Andrew Gould or anybody else in BG Group, or even if you don't, maybe you could drop Andrew Gould a line and let him know that BG Group are transgressing on the sacred sites of the Aborigine people of Australia. Now, this footage that I've brought back, in my opinion, is very powerful, but there again, one might say I'm biased. And what you've just witnessed is just a taster. Now, Marco Jackson, the brilliant young producer of The Truth Behind the Dash for Gas, has agreed to help me produce a video, a documentary of my visit to Australia. We have two possible working titles. One is Voices from the Gas Fields. The other one is It Started with Just One Well. And we'll see how it unfolds. But needless to say, a lot of this can only be achieved with support from your good selves. And I'm very appreciative of those people who supported me in that trip to Australia. But if you feel that you can contribute, or you wish to contribute in any way to the production of this documentary, and we really want to try and get it out by mid-January so that we can get this around the country, particularly in the run-up to the forthcoming general election in May of next year, because it is absolutely crucial that the people of the UK understand what their government is planning to unleash upon them in this country. So if you can contribute, please go to www.frackingnightmare.com and you'll see the donate button on the left-hand side of the page. Now join me in part 2 for some disturbing footage of a different kind, some unlawful behaviour by Humberside Police. And what we are going to witness is the country quickly descending into a corporatist police state. See you in part 2.
So where are the gas wells? Number 1, Tara Township. Here's the town of Tara. Let's zoom out and find the common radius measurement. So we're looking at about 18 kilometres, so that'd put 6 gas wells within 18 kilometres. So number 2, Chinchilla Township. So here's the township of Chinchilla. We zoom out, we get our 18 kilometres again, which gives us about 10 gas wells within the 18 kilometre radius. Now number 3, Dalby Township. Okay, so the Dalby Township, let's zoom out, get to our measurement tool, and for Dalby we end up with 1 gas well within a 19 kilometre radius. Number 4, the unlucky ones in the gas fields. This is QGC BG Group's Kenya Gas Fields processing plant on the edge of several residential estates and farms. The evaporation ponds alone cover almost 5.5 kilometres. So let's put it in perspective. Let's zoom out from the town of Chinchilla and make a comparison. The entire width from town end to end is 3.21 kilometres. The length is about 3.29 kilometres. The evaporation ponds would cover Chinchilla 1.5 times. Let's zoom out from one of QGC's gas fields. Yes, the dots are gas wells. Yes, the industry isn't even exporting yet. Go to our measurement tool and we have around a 22 kilometre radius. Now I'll give you an example of just how safe human beings will be throughout Australia with the unconventional gas industry. QGC's Kate Well cluster is in the heart of a residential estate. So Toowoomba, unconventional gas has its eyes seriously fixed on you and your surrounds. So no gas wells within a 32 kilometre radius, but if we go for a flight out to your west, you'll see the multinational giants aren't too far away. We pass Mount Irving, Mount Moriah, West Prairie, Cecil Plains, Grassdale, Cumberilla. Are you enjoying the flight? Bilby, Kogan, Williambilla. I can't see why people are whinging. This should be in everyone's backyard, shouldn't it? Here's QGC's tenements, Origin Energy's tenements. Oh, hang on, they're actually multinational corporations. Do you want this where you live? And ending with miles. And how about a flyover from Cecil Plains to central Queensland? This is beautiful farming country. Unfortunately, Those that are fixated on containment of the unconventional gas global giants are delusional. Prime agricultural land represents easier, more accessible drilling. It is not protected. As the government has indicated, it does not have the right to take a landholder's right to negotiate with a gas company away from them, even if they are on prime agricultural land. Zooming out and moving further north now, you can see we've really been asleep at the wheel. Zooming in, the blurred clusters turn into definable spots, each one potentially causing irreversible damage to the country. I just cannot stress enough that a majority of the unconventional gas wells are not yet in production. The true effects will become undeniable upon export. What's the scale of damage over Queensland so far? The gas industry is only in first gear in one state, covering over 1,000 kilometres long, over 300 kilometres wide. Some very credible projections put total potential unconventional gas well numbers in excess of 200,000 for Queensland alone. It is not the intent of this video to encourage a defeatist thought process. On the contrary, unconventional gas has been heavily wounded in the eyes of the public. Our window of opportunity still exists. Think national, not in my backyard. Stop the first export train, the Surat Basin to Gladstone's Curtis Island, and stop the unconventional gas industry in this country.
And welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, what you've just watched there was an animation produced by Brian's son, David Monk, nearly 18 months ago. It was actually uploaded to YouTube in July of 2013. Since that time, over 1,500 additional wells have been drilled in southern Queensland. It's staggering the speed at which this industry is destroying the bush around this part of the world. And next week, we'll be taking a look at the Queensland government's own display of the gas fields of southern Queensland, and you will be able to see instantaneously where landowners have refused to allow the gas companies onto their site because those blocks without gas wells stand out like the proverbial sore thumb. So, as Brian made the observation during our discussions, hopefully the people of Australia, elsewhere in Australia, will look at what's occurring in Queensland, as will the people in the UK. One of the things, though, that does rather shock me is if you go to Brian Monk's YouTube page. Brian and his son David have been putting videos up for 2.5, nearly 3 years now. Yet most of those videos barely have 1,000 views. Yet you would think that, Brian being absolutely right there on the front line, that these videos would be being shared left, right and centre, particularly by activists in Australia. Now, we know that YouTube does tend to doctor the numbers a little bit, but somehow, for whatever reason, those videos just aren't being shared. So if you're watching this from Australia and you have a Facebook page or you have any way in which you can promote awareness of Brian Monk's videos, then I would encourage you to do so. Now, here in the UK, we have a number of sites that are being primed, but we do have one that is right on the front line right now. And that is up in the northwest of England. And I'm just going to bring up the slide here because it's time for another iGasm. Because the iGas stock continues to absolutely tank. Take a look at this. It actually did drop under 50 pence, that is. I think that was about the week that I went off to Australia, and it clawed its way back. It did get up to 65. I think a lot of people buying as it fell below 50, but it's back down to 52.76 pence. That's 52 pence, not 52 pounds, 52 pence. So it's actually less than 1/3 of where it was in January. So it would seem that the small investors are getting the message. Get out of this industry while you've still got a chance. And of course, I should also acknowledge my good friends. Well, at the moment, you know, the old philosophy that your enemy is your friend. And right now, OPEC are doing an absolutely amazing job of dragging down the oil price, because once the oil price basically gets to about $65, and it's about 69, I think, at the moment, but once it gets to 65, then this industry is a dead duck. And you know, the only reason that the socio-psychopaths behind this industry will keep trying to get their bits in the ground is in the belief that holding the price at 65 or so is just a blip, and it will climb back. But how much of a black hole are you going to dig between now and then? So I guess they have their site currently at Ellesmere Port, and we've had a couple of lock-ons there. So you know, the people, this is a very real lock-on. I mean, unfortunately, some of the lock-ons that are going on elsewhere in the world are training days only. But here in the UK, when there's a lock-on, there's a lock-on. And this was preventing the trucks going into the iGas site. Now, if you want to show your solidarity for the people of Ellesmere Port, then be there this Sunday. I will be there with the camera. And if you'd like to say a few words to camera, and we'll get the word out next Monday. Next Monday's edition of Fracking Nightmare will be the last one for 2014. But there are people coming from all over the country to Ellesmere Port next Sunday. It's just off the motorway, very easy to get to. So join us there at 12 o'clock, and the party will go on till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and hopefully the weather will be kind to us. So now, meanwhile, across the other side of the country, Crawberry Hill, Rathlin Energy, the company of David Montague Smith. You'll remember him. He's also the chairman of the Northamptonshire branch of the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England. And in his capacity as chairman of the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, he's been actively lobbying to get the subsidies removed for renewables, whilst, of course, taking anything that he can get to help get the shale gas industry established in the northeast of England. So Rathlin Energy are up behind the 8 ball at the moment, because their West Newton site proved to be an absolute disaster, as has been revealed in the past week. They had fire in the hole. They did inform the Health and Safety Executive and also the Environment Agency, who weren't going to share the information, but because they're subject to the Freedom of Information Act, the events were eventually released into the public domain. But the West Newton site is now abandoned, and Rathlin Energy are going to be seeking planning permission to develop a second site. Needless to say, I think the people of East Yorkshire may have something to say about that. 10 miles away from West Newton, though, at Crawberry Hill, Rathlin still have not managed to bring their rig onto the site there. Of course, they have planning permission, which has been extended for 12 months. And the local residents and the protection community are certainly going to do their level best to make it extremely difficult for Rathlin to achieve what they want to achieve in the next 12 months. And sadly, what we are seeing is increasing evidence of the police behaving in the role of corporate enforcement officers and not police or peace officers. So I want to welcome my guest tonight, Pete Lomas. Pete, how are you doing there?
All right, yourself?
I'm not too bad at all, thanks. Thanks for joining us this evening. Now, Pete, you and I have known each other since, certainly the beginning of the year, when we first had a conversation about what was likely to unfold in East Yorkshire. And then I met you, I think, in person at a meeting in Hull, where we were discussing setting up the camp at Crawberry Hill. And you have been absolutely central in terms of liaising between the camp and the local community and raising awareness right across East Yorkshire, because you are East Yorkshire born and bred, correct?
I am, yeah. Well, I was born in Scotland, but I was brought down here when I was a little baby. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is my hometown. And I've spent my life around the West Newton area as well, brought up around there. So I'm very familiar with the area. So yeah, and it sort of breaks my heart to see what's going on at the moment as well. So, you know, we've just got to be active and keep active and keep on at them. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, you've been very central, although, of course, the British government and the police can only comprehend a hierarchical sort of organisation structure. They seem to have some difficulty getting their head around the fact that the anti-fracking community in this country is completely leaderless and has no structure. It's completely flat. So I think there's something like about 370 groups around the country who all operate completely autonomously. So the police seem to have, though, tagged you as being a ringleader, because it would certainly seem that they've been targeting you. I mean, that's just my observation from the outside looking in. Is that the way it feels to you?
Certainly does. And obviously, you know, I've been arrested a couple of times, and they're just so low onto themselves, and they want people away from the camps. Like you say, there's no leaders. We're an autonomous movement, you know, and we, you know, I think because I've been so active online and pushing the right buttons, I guess, I think maybe that's why I've been singled out a bit. There's not only me, there are other people as well, but, you know, personally, yeah, I feel as though I've been targeted.
Well, you know, it's an absolute credit to you that, you know, you are labelled, probably, like me, as a non-violent domestic extremist. And, of course, the police are trying to remove two words from that description by deliberately intimidating people and trying to get a rise out of them so that, you know, they have due cause to perpetrate a vicious arrest. And we saw much of that, particularly, of course, at Barton Moss. Now, I think the first time you were arrested was October the 2nd. Is that right? Is that the day that we're going to see in a second? That was the first arrest that you had. Is that correct, Pete? Pete, the line has frozen, and it has dropped. Well, I guess that GCHQ are probably checking this out, and they had a call from Humberside Police. Quick! Break the line, shut it down. We don't want this video going out on Fracking Nightmare. We're going to get it one way or another anyway. Let's see if we can get Pete back. Not just yet. Well, meanwhile... Yeah, oh, Pete's back. Pete?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you switch on the video so that we can see the video?
Hold on.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, it's right. We have had this problem before. It's the joys of Kingston communications.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So for those people who live outside of Hull, they won't appreciate the idiosyncrasies of Kingston communications. So if it does drop out, we'll just try and bring you straight back. This is the joys of a live transmission. So the video that we're going to see in a second, was that the first time that you were arrested?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we do know that the police had made sort of some futile attempts to arrest you before, but now we're going to see a video in a second. But what was the alleged charge that they were basing this arrest upon?
Running a stick along a fence.
Running a stick along a fence. Now, you know, when I was a kid, I think that was something that we used to do all the time. We used to grab the stick and, you know, run it along the railings or on the fence or whatever. And I don't seem to recall getting too much attention from the for the police for that.
No, I mean it's just absolutely ridiculous. They tried to get me on criminal damage. There was no criminal damage. There was no video evidence to show any criminal damage, either prior or after the alleged incident with a stick.
Well, we're gonna watch the video of the arrest. We're going to talk over it because what we're going to see is we're going to see it unadulterated, unedited. We're actually going to see this this section of about 10 minutes, and we'll get you to sort of talk us through some of the key moments here. But some points maybe that people need to understand. The camp is established at Crawberry Hill under a Section 6, which basically means these are private dwellings. They are personal dwellings. So for the police to enter them, they have to be treated as a private dwelling, and therefore they have to have a warrant to enter these buildings. Now, if of course there was violence occurring, or they felt that somebody's life or well-being was under threat, then that would certainly be considered just cause to force entry. But the police knew full well that the only allegation against you here was that you had run a stick along a fence.
That's correct, and that came from what I can gather. That came from Beacon Security. Obviously, the security people that were up at Crawberry Hill, who are a nasty bunch in themselves.
Yeah, in fact, well, most of the people working for Beacon Security, of course, are people who couldn't actually get into the police. Unfortunately, they have to step down. The bad news is, of course, that once the police is fully privatised, then all of those thugs that are currently working for Beacon and other security companies will be probably on the front line, in police uniform or under G4S uniform. But
then we've got to worry some more.
Really. And so I also want to make the observation that we're showing this video because the case has now been heard. And I know there's a second element to this, and we'll talk about that second element a little bit later. But fundamentally, all charges were dismissed. I mean, it was basically thrown out of court, right?
Yeah, it was, yeah. There was, when I was interviewed, the interviewing policewoman said she'd viewed a video showing me damaging the fence. And ultimately, there was no video to show me damaging anything whatsoever. So there was no evidence at all. And,
so Humberside Police basically lied.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, which is unfortunately becoming an increasing common denominator amongst British police. I mean, the only saving grace is that the British police aren't yet carrying firearms, because there's no doubt in my mind that seeing the behaviour of some of the police at Borkham, at Barton Moss and at Crawberry Hill, if they had firearms, then we'd be in a very, very difficult situation. I mean, we've had 500 people in the US this year murdered by the police. And, I'm sure that... Oh, and by the way, I heard, I think just a couple of days ago, that Iceland had its first ever death by police officer, and that the nation is in absolute shock. In this country, we've had some 2,100 deaths in police custody over the last, I think, 20-odd years, but not a single police officer has ever been called to account or had to face justice for those deaths in police custody. So, we're on a slippery slope, and, as we witness this outrageous and unlawful behaviour, then it has to be exposed. So we're going to roll the video. So, Pete, you talk us through what's occurring here.
There was up to 5 or 6 police officers stormed the camp, basically. If the people can hear the audio, they wanted to speak to me. They wanted to speak to Mr. Lomas. Now, if you want to speak to somebody, you don't do this.
So this is a female police officer who has suddenly decided unilaterally to force her way in.
That's correct.
So she is effectively she's effectively trespassing at this point.
She is, and I mean they were so intent on grabbing me for my offence of a stick. In the process, I mean, if you saw at the beginning, one of the protectors got an elbow in the neck and the chin. If you see now, there's another lady there. Very shortly, she gets thrown into the ditch right next to a corrugated steel piece of roofing, and she gets trampled on. So, I mean, obviously, my first thought was to go down there and get her out of the ditch. I didn't think about myself. I wanted to go down there and help her. and in that process she got trampled on all over her stomach. Now, at this stage I was not even under any arrest. I wasn't even told what was happening. And there's another protector there, obviously trying to help the lady that went down on the floor. It's really hard to watch this, so you just have to bear with me. So finally, they start to drag me outside near the kitchen. I must say as well,
this is you now. I can just see your head there. So the female police officer has got you. It looks like almost with her arm around the back of your neck.
Yeah, well, they tried to break my fingers and all kinds of stuff while they were doing it. So now they've got me, and they're dragging me down the side of the kitchen. I must add as well, when they did this to the kitchen, they destroyed some roofing as well, which could have fell off and easily fell on someone and killed them outright. So in this process now, you'll see one of the protectors goes around the other side with the camera, but here now they actually flatten one of their own police officers, female, and continue to drag me and themselves over that female police officer. Yeah, this is the protector going around the other side now with the camera. You'll see them here again dragging me. I think there's about 4 or 5 of them. And one of the protectors had hold of me, like, so he didn't want them to get hold of me. But I asked him to let me go, because I didn't want to see him get hurt. So yeah, this is for dragging a stickle on a fence on the hearsay of a security guard. So they're taking me down here now, and I suffer from anxiety and panic attacks as well. I think even up to now as well, I didn't even know what was happening or what I was being arrested for.
So they had simply said that they wanted to speak to you.
Yeah.
And I mean, basically, you'd run a stick along a fence, but never in your wildest dreams anticipated that something like that would result in this kind of treatment.
No. But I mean, like I said, I'm in here. Obviously, they've got me in some kind of arm lock as well, but they caused damage to my neck as well, and damage to some other people. We have seek legal advice on this, so we're not going to let this kind of behaviour lie. I mean, if showing this can help this not happen to anybody else, then that's the main object of showing this video for me.
Well, and we appreciate you letting us show this video, Pete, because you're absolutely right. I mean, people need to see that this is how peaceful protesters, if you wish to use the police terminology, peaceful protectors, if you wish to use our terminology, but this is how the police are being instructed to treat people. Now, we know that when the police are being briefed, they're basically being told that the people at the camps are second only to absolute ISIS terrorists. In fact, David Cameron made the same observation. He said that non-violent domestic extremists need to be treated just like ISIS, which is completely outrageous.
I mean, it's as though they've just found some kind of guy, mass murderer who's escaped from prison, do you know what I mean? And they just took him away again in a van. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Now, you're in the police van here, and I believe that you are actually suffering a bit of a panic attack at this point.
I am, yeah.
And obviously just asking, for a little bit of respite. Now, I see they've taken your coat off here.
This will go into the other part you maybe wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
They took my coat off me and they wouldn't hand over any belongings. They actually searched the coat there and then. So, I mean, you can go into this now if you want.
Yeah, go tell us the rest.
Well, at the police station, they took my coat there and they had hold of my coat all the time. And at the police station, they walked in with me and they had my coat. And at the check-in desk, a bag of weed magically appeared out my jacket. Now, I don't take drugs. I don't condone taking drugs. And I sure as hell wouldn't have had a bag of weed in my pocket, and it was a big bag of weed as well.
Well, I have to say, Pete, that with
I'm not make out what you want, but that bag of weed wasn't in my pocket.
No, Pete, listen, I mean, in all the time I've known you, I mean, we've got to know each other pretty well over that time, and with the possible exception of myself, I actually can't think of anyone less likely to have a bag of weed in their pocket.
That's right. It's just not me at all, and anybody that knows me will know that.
So, I mean, there is no other way really to view this than this was a deliberate attempt to effectively fit you up with the charge of possession of a controlled substance.
Well, they tried that, and it failed. That got thrown out of court as well.
Exactly. Exactly. And I have to make the observation that it is primarily, thank goodness for the British judiciary, that we still have the remnants of justice in this country, because it is becoming increasingly evident that the police are simply performing whatever instruction they are given to act as the corporate enforcement officers. And I mean, 2 years ago, let me make the observation, 2 years ago, I had absolutely no reason to call the credibility of the British police into question. But, my own personal experiences of, fairly up close and personal contact with a number of police forces over the past 2 years has changed my view dramatically. And I know that increasingly Middle England are becoming, more and more disturbed at the way in which the British police are behaving.
Yeah, they're obviously, like you say, they're getting their orders from up high. I mean, I just can't understand why they're acting this way. Whether obviously they're getting told to do something and do it, they will. They're just following orders. But then again, that's what happened in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that's the Nuremberg syndrome. Well, actually, if I refer people to the first 3 episodes, which I recorded much earlier this year, the first 3 episodes of Humanity versus Insanity, where I was joined by Brian Gerrish, and we were looking at the deliberate reframing of the police, effectively the brainwashing of the police to remove any empathy that they may have with the British public, so that they will, literally do whatever it is that they're told to do without giving it any further thought. And, as you've alluded to, under the Nuremberg protocols, it is beholden upon any individual to question an order.
I mean, these guys, it's as though they're on something, you know what I mean? They're either on something, or they've been brainwashed, or they've been NLP'd. There's something not right with them, because you don't act like that. Well, you're not supposed to act like that, are you?
No, I mean, let me make the observation. I have come across, 1 or 2, police officers who, certainly would appear, at face value anyway, to be reasonable. But the vast majority, unfortunately, you look into their eyes and the eyes glaze over and there's just nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, there was, if you look back at the video, if anyone looks back at it, you'll notice towards the end there is a police officer there and he was actually crying. So whether that's because of what the witness of what he'd just seen, I don't know. But even in the back of the police van, there was a blonde police officer and their lady, and she was absolutely shocked, and she was the one that got trampled on by her own police officers. And the actual sergeant, the lady with black hair, asked her to book me in at Bridlington police station, and she refused. So there probably is a little bit of empathy there somewhere,
Well, all I say is that, those decent police officers, we need them to stay in the force. I would never for one moment suggest that they don't. We need them to stay in the force. We need them to question the orders of their superiors. And Justine Curran, who is the Chief Constable for Humberside Police, really has a lot to answer for here, because ultimately, she is responsible and she is accountable. And the reality is that the protection community aren't going away. Whilst Rathlin Energy have a presence in East Yorkshire, so there will be a protection community. And the more outrageous and the more aggressive that the police get, then the more creative the protection community will become. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, touch wood, but thus far I've managed to avoid arrest. But I have an unfortunate sense that that may not continue. And you know what? The reality is that we have to do whatever we have to do. And I have to tell you that after coming back from Australia, and spending time with the people who are living in the gas fields, then I'm absolutely even more determined to make sure that this abomination doesn't get unleashed in this country.
Yeah, I mean, if Rathling Energy or Humberside Police or anyone thinks that the protection community is going away, then think again. We're going to be here, and we'll do whatever we can to stop it, obviously peacefully, because that's what we are. We're peaceful people, and Humberside Police need to understand that.
Well, not only will we not be intimidated, but we will use this to show what it is that we're up against. And I know that this video will shock a lot of people who are watching this. Now, my other program, Humanity versus Insanity, which unfortunately didn't go out tonight because the jet lag swept over me and I couldn't muster the energy. But Humanity versus Insanity has about 5 times the viewers of Fracking Nightmare, because we cover a broader range of subjects, and we will be playing this footage out on a future edition of Humanity versus Insanity. Now, the full footage is also up on my YouTube channel, and I would encourage anybody who is so motivated, please copy it, paste it on your own YouTube channels, spread it out. Let's make it very clear to people that the anti-fracking protection community will not be intimidated. And when the police behave like this, then we will simply use it to gain probably even more publicity for what we're trying to achieve than we would achieve if the police behaved reasonably. It's a double-edged sword, and I made this observation to Thugs Are Us, the TAU in Manchester, that every time they lost control, they gave us more publicity than we could ever hope to achieve on our own. And if I was really perverse, I would say there's, there may be somebody in the police who is actually on our side who said, you know what, let's have a violent arrest, because then that'll go viral, and then more and more people will start to take notice of what's going on in the anti-fracking community.
Who knows? Do you know what I mean? Who knows? I mean, there's lots of stuff going on. I mean, it's not only the arrest. There are other things going on, but I guess we can talk about that another time if you want.
Absolutely.
But I mean, my wish is hopefully that if this video can be spread as far as you can, that it will hopefully stop or try to stop any more violence by the police, and that's why I wanted it putting out. So thanks for doing that.
Hey, well, thank you for coming on, Pete. Now, I also know that subsequently you were arrested yet again, and it was another completely fallacious and erroneous arrest. I mean, it was a total construct. I mean, even the police at the time weren't sure whether or not the arrest was going to take place. Is that correct?
That's right. There was a lock on the other day. I think people might have seen what happened at Crawbury. And about 5 hours later, I was getting ready to empty my tent. I was stood at the side of the road. They walked down and they said, "We might have to arrest you." I was like, "You might have to arrest me? What for?" Conspiracy to cause criminal damage. And it was just something that they must have plucked out of the air. Do you know what I mean? So they went away for about 25 minutes to have a conflab or whatever, and then I had to wait there 25 minutes to wait to see if I was going to be arrested. Consequently, I was taken to the police station, chucked in a cell for 2 hours, not interviewed, let out and charged with obstruct highway and obstruct police officer, which is another 2 charges plucked out of the air again. So they just wanted me away again. So this is why I feel I'm being targeted, amongst other things.
No, it's clear you are being targeted. It's clear I mean, it should be very clear to everybody that the Humberside police are adopting intimidatory tactics. They're trying to dissuade people from coming up and joining the protection camp. They're trying to dissuade the local community from supporting the protection camp. But I'm pleased to say it's going to have the absolute opposite effect, because I know that there are a number of people who are planning on making their way to Crawberry Hill, myself included. I shall be back there later this week, and I shall be looking forward to asking the Humberside police if they've watched the video. You know what? I think the vast majority of people who watch this program now are actually either part of the police or part of the industry or part of the government, because most of the anti-fracking community actually know what's going on. So this is an opportunity for the police, the industry, and the government to update themselves. And guys, you're losing. You're losing on every angle. And Pete may be charged with conspiracy to commit criminal damage, which we know is a fallacious charge. But what are you guys doing? Conspiracy to poison the nation's water supply, conspiracy to poison the soil, conspiracy to poison the air, because that's exactly what's happening everywhere else in the world where this industry has got its bits in the ground. And by the time we've got the footage together from my trip to Australia, then you're going to have even more difficult questions to ask. So, you're either with the protection community or you're with the socio-psychopathic global corporatists who are intent on destroying this nation's ecology. We'll take a short break. I'll see you back in part 3.
"60% of the English countryside is under threat from fracking, a process which has transformed the landscape in many parts of the United States and Australia, and contaminated the drinking water and air with highly toxic chemicals and gases.
1 in 3 hydraulic fracturing was using a carcinogen. So it really is a chemical cocktail that goes into the earth, of which up to 40% remains there.
The grandchildren were in the bath and they started screaming and everything that was in the water was burnt.
The MDs have been instructed not to report any negative health effects that they believe to be associated with living over a gas field.
There's nothing inherent about the shale gas process that is going to lead to problems.
Some of this material was actually taken to a large sewage treatment works, which had no capacity to handle radioactive materials of this kind.
800,000 gallons was dumped into the Manchester Ship Canal.
50 seismic events were recorded during just 6 fracking treatments.
What is the minimum depth that the fracking will fracture?
We can't tell you until we drill the exploration.
Have you no idea whatsoever? Because it doesn't look like you've done your research.
Shale gas is part of the future and we will make it happen.
We are just numbers and we are sat on this rich vein of gas, and they will do and say anything to get that gas out of the ground.
Well, welcome back to part 3 of episode 41 of Fracking Nightmare. It's going to be a very short part 3 because we're rapidly coming to the end of the show. But just before I went to Australia, I did a 10-date speaking tour in North Yorkshire. The speaking tour was called Is Fracking Safe? Well, we know that Third Energy sent along their spies to gauge the public reaction. And I think that they've decided that they'd better actually start getting their bits in the ground sooner rather than later, because those talks were attended by nearly 2% of the adult population of the Ryedale area. So now Third Energy, which is 97% owned by Barclays Bank, so if you're a Barclays customer, you might want to let them know what you think of that. But Third Energy have announced that they are going to run, or they plan to run, a mini frack in Kirby Misperton. So Kirby Misperton, we've got here, this is a poster that has been put up by the local group, Frack Free Rydale. And they are very, very much under threat right now, because the location that is being targeted is Kirby Misperton, which is where Third Energy drilled the deep well there. So the well is already on the pad. But this is very close to Flamingo Land. So, Flamingo Land is one of the major tourist attractions in this part of the world. And the well site is probably no more than, certainly less than half a mile away from Flamingo Land. So if you are a regular patron of Flamingo Land, then maybe you want to write to Flamingo Land, because I certainly wouldn't be taking my kids to any location that is that close to a fracked well. And if you want to see the experience of people who have been living close to a well that has just been subjected to the same treatment that Third Energy want to use at Kirby Misperton, then just drive 45 miles south down to West Newton, where Rathlin Cowboys managed to lose the well there, even actually getting fire in the hole. But the well is now having to be abandoned, and the Cowboys are now looking to drill another well and expose another set of East Yorkshire residents to the noise and smell pollution that they subjected the residents of New Ellaby and West Newton to a few weeks ago. So if you live in North Yorkshire, then take a trip down to East Yorkshire, hook up with the people at Crawberry Hill and West Newton, because no doubt there will be protectors coming up to North Yorkshire to help the residents fight against Third Energy's presence there. And of course, we hope to see as many of you as possible at Earlsmere Port this coming Sunday. Next week, there'll be a bit more of an update of my experiences in Australia, and a review of how in the UK we have managed to almost achieve a frack-free 2014. I say almost, because Rathlin almost fracked West Newton. 2015's going to be a lot more difficult, but not impossible. Between us, we can do it. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Pete Lomas. Thanks for joining me this evening. Thanks for sharing your experiences. And I'll see you later in the week, my friend. And see you guys all next week for episode 42 next Monday.